I want to give a quick shout out to all of my patrons. Thank you so much for continuing to support my channel. And I am done. Okay, so I just finished up reading Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. And I want to give you my unedited thoughts upon finishing the book, which was just right now. So this book is incredible. This is a 5 out of 5, one of the easiest 5 out of 5s that I've ever given in my life. And I'm pretty sure, you know what, I'm just gonna say it. This is the second best book that I've ever read across any genre. This book is incredible. Every single thing about this book rocks. You couldn't add anything to this book to make it better. You couldn't take away anything to this book to make it better. It's perfect in every single way. I am just in awe over what I just read, and I'm so glad that I got this book recommended to me to read. I got recommended this book by Brian Lee Durfee, who is an amazing YouTuber. You should give him a shot. He does fantasy videos. And he declared that this book is his favorite book of all time. And I was looking it up and I found out that it's also Stephen King's favorite book of all time. And I was like, oh man, I gotta read this then. And I'm reading this book, and as I'm getting through it, the feeling that I'm getting is like, if Joe Abercrombie were to write like a strictly Western book, this is the book that he would write. But he wouldn't do as good of a job. And I say that as somebody who has, Joe Abercrombie as one of the greatest authors of all time. Maybe like a top 3 or 4 favorite author. And that's how good I think this book is. Essentially what this book is about is it's 2 former Texas Rangers who are total opposites from each other. One of them is the guy you would think of as an old school Western Texas Ranger. He's, straight and narrow, never drinks, never gambles, always wants to do the right thing, wants to take out the bad guy, kind of stiff personality. Then you got his partner, who is the opposite. All he wants to do is drink and gamble. He doesn't really like hard work. He's the funny guy. But they're best friends. And you wouldn't really know that as you're reading the book at the beginning, even though they live together. And they live like with multiple people. And you get the sense that that's kind of what they did back in these days. But because they don't get along very well. But if you read along, you find out that that's just their personality. That's how their friendship has developed, and that they really do love each other. And that really becomes clear as the story goes along for very specific reasons that you'll find out as you read this book, which you have to do. These 2 former Texas Rangers, the story opens up in this town of Lonesome Dove. And Lonesome Dove is in southern Texas near the Mexican border. And they have a slow kind of intro introducing all the characters of this little town. Emphasis on the little, it is not big. And I mean, you get to meet these 2 guys, you get to meet their sidekick, you get to meet their adopted son, the one whore that lives in town, the piano player. I mean, there's all these different kind of casting characters that are so colorful in their own way. But it opens up kind of like a comedy, and as the story progresses, it slowly turns into a tragedy. And then it ends up in an enormous tragedy. And that's a fun story arc for me. I love when books, change the arc that they're going on. And I really loved the way that this one did it in its own kind of unique way. But so these 2 Texas Rangers, they decide to stop their boring life running this little horse boarding operation they have, and not horse boarding, but like they sell horses, but on really low scale. And they decide to go steal thousands of cattle from Mexico and drive them up into Montana, into like the Yellowstone area, to be the first people to take cattle there and to start a ranch. And the entire book is about this journey, about this huge cattle drive. But that sounds kind of boring. but it is not. It is action-packed, really from the beginning to the end. Excuse the cut there. I have to do a little cough break. I am trying really badly not to get sick like the rest of my family, but I am staying strong. So the books continues on this cattle drive, and the action that goes on this cattle drive is just fun and old Western kind of thing. You know, you've got horribly poisonous snake bites. You know, you've got lightning, like deadly lightning. You've got horrendous rain. You've got treacherous river crossings that is a really scary thing for people driving cattle, because the cattle will end up miles downstream and they've got to figure out a way to rile them up. And if they fall in the water, they were probably going to die, because none of these guys know how to swim because they're from the middle of Texas. There's outlaws and Indians and so much more. It's such a fun story. Even though it's tragic, it's just constantly fun. This book is, as I was looking it up, as I was reading this, is oftentimes described as like an anti-Western. And what that term means is, as we think of a Western, what I think of is kind of like the old John Wayne kind of thing, where you've got this hero that's going to take out the bad guys. And that's not what this story is. I mean, all of these characters are deeply flawed. Even the one character I said that is like this upstanding guy is deeply flawed. And so there's no heroes here, which is kind of one of the things I mentioned is why this is kind of an Abercrombie book, is he loves doing that. And he loves killing off characters. And this book has a lot of that. I won't tell you who, but get ready. It's going to hit you hard. But I love this aspect of this real sort of Western take here, because when I grew up in America, and so there was a lot of romanticism around this old West being a cowboy kind of thing and how fun that would be. But you really get the sense here very early on that it's not a fun time to live. It's not a fun place to live. It's a very tragic place to live. Death comes early and often. Small things can ruin your life. You have getting your arm cut off for basic things. Toothaches can turn into like horrific things. You got to worry about everywhere you walk around. You can't go walk around at night because you might get killed by a snake. You always got to be watching your back because Indians might come and take you and rape the women and scalp you, and scary stuff and boring. I mean, these people describe their life as just, nothing happening other than just sitting in the heat. I mean, you get this appreciation that there is no air conditioning. These people have never seen ice in their lives. It's kind of miserable. And I love that. I love the reality that is actually coming out in this story. So the characters here are what make this story perfect. I mentioned some of them, but I don't want to go into depth on these characters, but just know that there's this very large cast of these cowboys that come on, and others that are just so well done. I don't want to say it puts like Robin Hobb to shame, but it gives her a very serious challenge for some of the greatest character writing that I've ever read. And that says something, because I put Robin Hobb on this pedestal of perfect character writing, but this has to be up there too, because every character has this amazing depth. They grow. You learn so much about them. They all feel real and different, and you care about them for different reasons, even if what you care about is a negative feeling. McMurtry just knocks it out of the park. It's such a cool thing to watch. I got to say also that there are multiple story arcs here, and it's, you got to trust though that these arcs are going to come together in a really glorious way. But it feels kind of off-putting as you're reading the story. You're ready to read about this cattle drive, and all of a sudden the cattle drive starts off, and nope, we're getting another story. But there's a reason for it, and you're going to come to appreciate it, and come to appreciate those new characters that got introduced to us. There's a very important purpose here, and it's not just to pad the story. They need to be here to tell ultimately what this story really is all about. I also love that this is a lot more than a cowboy story. This is an American West story. It tells the story of the plight of the Indians, a very tragic plight of the Indians, where you have Indians, you have regular citizens, you have the army, and they all believe land belongs to them. And the tragic consequences that come from that when some of these groups have significantly greater access to weaponry than others. And you can just, this book really shows the sadness that goes along with what happened to the Native Americans. It's a story about the eradication of the buffalo. It's a story about what women had to go through in this time period and what it was like to be a woman living back then, and what would happen to you if life kind of started to go down. So I can't stop gushing about this book. I'll stop here and just say, do yourself a favor, go pick up this book. The only people I would not suggest this book to are those that say one of two things. One is, I'm very squeamish. There are some moments here that are not for the faint of heart. They're not excessive, but they exist. The other is, if you want to read a happy story, this is not a happy story. You're going to cry at least once, maybe up to like 4 or 5 times, but it's going to be sad, and you're not going to finish the story feeling good. You're going to feel sad, but that's good in its own way. For me, I like a story that can do that, and has that thing that it wants to tell and is committed to it. So for all of the rest of you, and I'm hoping that is you, go do yourself a favor. Pick up Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. I guarantee that you will not regret reading this book. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, happy reading to you. Thank you again to my patrons, and a special shout out to my Ascendant tier patrons, Danute and Sky.